If there's one message we'd like to convey in this video, it's that the level of one's popularity doesn't always coincide with one's prosperity. In other words, there are numerous business tycoons lurking in the background whose names you'll never have ever heard of, yet names you never forget if you're ever lucky enough to discover their remarkable rags-to-riches stories. The story of Joseph Safra is an apt example of this phenomenon, and by the end, you'll know why. Bubbling with mystique and controversy, Joseph Safra's rise to prosperity is quite the riddle, and an intriguing one at that. Things only become more interesting when you discover that his surname Safra literally translates to gold in his native Arabic language. Yes, really, his very name has overtones of abundance, and if you've ever visited the City of London, you'll see a soaring monument of Safra's prosperity, situated snap bang amongst London's quirkiest skyscrapers, the oddly shaped Gherkin tower that looks a lot like a giant eagle's egg. Quite a fitting purchase for the world's richest banker, as rated by Forbes. So let's make an attempt to unravel the hidden pockets in the Joseph Safra story, and see if we can excavate some insightful gems of wisdom. But before we dive straight into the man's life, it's worth casting a pair of lenses into his lineage, since the man's wealth cannot be separated from his kinfolk, now known today as the Safra dynasty. This Sephardic Jewish family, which later gave birth to Banco Joseph, was a firmly embedded banking dynasty of Ottoman-era Middle East. The Safras played an integral role in facilitating trade between different corners of the empire, from the silver merchants in Constantinople to the booksellers in Cairo. By 1918, however, the Ottoman Empire had all but fallen apart, leaving the Middle East and Lebanon in the powers of the victorious allies of World War I. At about that time, Joseph's father, Jacob, split his business from that of his family and decided to relocate from Aleppo to Beirut to start his own bank, titled the Jacob E. Safra Bank. Meanwhile, in 1938, Jacob had his second son, whom he called Joseph. However, by World War II and its aftermath, hostility towards Jews was intensifying, which forced Jacob to move to Brazil in order to protect his family's interests. That he completed by 1952, and set up his headquarters in Sao Paulo, Brazil. By 1955, his second son, Joseph, was 23 years old. Joining forces with him, he opened up their first Brazilian bank, now known today as Banco Safra de Investimento. His eldest son, Edmund, decided to branch out with ventures in Switzerland and the United States, leaving Joseph in charge of the future of the newly forged Brazilian bank's future. And, much to Joseph's good fortune, the Banco Safra proved an incredibly successful venture. Under his leadership, the bank grew so amazingly fast that it quickly became one of the largest banks of the country. Today, it's reportedly the sixth largest bank in Brazil, with assets numbering $49 billion as of 2019. And since 2006, Joseph now holds the dominant portion of Banco Safra and its affiliated companies, having brought out the last remaining shares that belonged to his brother, Moise Safra. What's more, his elder brother, whom we mentioned earlier, mysteriously died in a fire in 2011, which left Joseph as the last man standing in the family's banking empire. According to the latest measures, his personal assets number about $23.6 billion, which apparently exceeds the fortunes of any other banker in the world if Forbes is to be believed. However, it's not to say that the 65 years since 1955 have all been bright and rosy. At times, Joseph stumbled across painful losses, edifying how the journey to becoming a millionaire is rarely, if ever, smooth. In 1998, Joseph secured a license to field a broadcasting company. However, the owners later told him that he'll only receive a minor share in the business, against what was promised previously. This duped deal cost Joseph a staggering $2.6 billion. A decade later, in 2009, Joseph was forced to close down his eucalyptus pulp business upon an edict by the Brazilian government. According to the government, Safra's eucalyptus pulp company was on the verge of becoming bankrupt, although it's alleged that the government at the time was under the backroom influence of rival companies in the respective trade. Later, and despite his scrupulous secrecy, Joseph was charged for allegedly bribing the federal government in an attempt to evade his tax bill. The charges were eventually dismissed, however, and the Safra group maintained its innocence from any intentional wrongdoing. But as troubling as the bumps above may sound, Safra's resolve seems to have superseded them. What's more, he has emerged as the seemingly luckiest Safra to date, given the fate of his adventurous brother Edmund Safra. Initially, Edmund Safra was reaching the stratosphere with his mountains of wealth. Having branched out to open banks in Switzerland and New York, Edmund seemed to hold the limelight as the most successful Safra amongst the dynasty. Until when in 2011, Edmund died in a mysterious fire in his mansion in Monte Carlo, France. Whilst Edmund's nurse was initially the prime suspect for the suspicious freak fire, his wife was also the subject of speculation. The mystery of his death still remains unresolved and subject to numerous conspiracy theories. But that can wait for another video, since Joseph's story still has much more to offer. Given Edmund's fate, however, it's of little surprise that Joseph is fastidious with his security arrangements. In fact, his whole family is, and very understandably so. The Safras only hire guards trained by the much-feared Israeli intelligence agency Mossad, who are known to train the most hawk-eyed security officers in the world. Anyway, more about Safra's fortune. He also happens to own 50% of a banana company, Chiquita Brands. Like his fellow wealthy billionaires, Safra similarly claims a large real estate empire spanning the Americas, the British Isles, and mainland Europe. His real estate holdings are estimated to amount to $2.2 billion, much of owing itself to the Gherkin Tower that we mentioned previously. Furthermore, in 2012, he acquired Bank Saracen in Switzerland for 2.1 billion francs and renamed it the Joseph Safra Saracen Bank. As a result, the majority of Safra's wealth comes from his large banking empire, of whose capital is Sao Paulo, home to the original Banco Safra. And although his name is becoming increasingly recognized across business circles, many of his business moves are still shrouded in secrecy. Safra's decisions never follow a predictable path and often surprise even the most hawk-eyed observers. When he purchased the Gherkin in 2014, he never made any flamboyant announcement of it. And nor did he drop any hints of interest in the building before sealing the deal. Effectively, secrecy has become the most fitting adjective to describe Safra's business style. And it's worth noting that Safra isn't the first one to maintain a cloak of secrecy, since his father and grandfather were largely the same, which could explain the monumental success of the Safra dynasty, despite being hurtled across different corners of the world. Only compounding his aura of mystique, Safra is known to possess some idiosyncratic traits that no fellow billionaire has ever claimed of doing. Like, never have I ever seen a bossy billionaire apologize to the wives of his male employees by handing them gift boxes of jewelry. That was until I discovered Joseph's rather unique set of mannerisms. In other words, Joseph buys jewelry for them to apologize for keeping their husbands busily working away until late. What a conscientious, if a little meticulous, of a boss. Interestingly, Joseph has a few more idiosyncratic traits that one can't help but mention. He loves reading old and rare books when he isn't busy for a start, but strangely, he also dislikes speaking the language of his home nation, Brazilian Portuguese. He feels as if people will misunderstand him if he spoke his native tongue, so often he prefers to use French, English, or Hebrew instead, depending on where he is. And despite his oodles of wealth, he prefers to live a rather simple and modest life. At one point he bought himself a mansion, then regretted it and instead returned to spending his money on investments, i.e. making more money. At the same time, he can be quite the workaholic. His family may be laying in the beach lounges of the Bahamas, but Joseph will continue sealing deals in his office. Up till now, Joseph has received heart surgery twice, which may have been exacerbated by his addiction to working long hours. What's more, he is known to call his employees at odd times of the day and will order them to come to the office or take an overseas trip on short notice. And once his employee has received a sudden order, he doesn't take no for an answer. Working under pressure at odd and for long hours is the prerequisite for anyone wishing to serve Safra's banking empire. Maintaining a scrupulous work ethic for himself and his companies has played an integral part in his journey, since the completion of tasks and the raising of fortunes has been his central and unrivaled priority. That said, the man is far from being imprisoned in his banking towers. Joseph is known to be passionate about helping victims of war. Having grown up in Lebanon, Joseph was well aware of the horrors of war. His donations often went to organizations serving people's essential needs, like food, water, and education. Beyond that, and due to his Jewish background, he's funded the construction of numerous synagogues around the world. Despite being over 80 years old, he's still running strong, with his children supporting him in running his banking conglomerate. And yes, pardon us, we almost forgot to mention Joseph has a family of 3 sons, 1 daughter, and is married to a lady called Vicky Safati. Currently, he lives in Brazil, but has an abundance of second homes around the world if he ever wishes to retire elsewhere. So that's him, the most intrepid, enigmatic, and wealthiest banker alive, capturing the intrigue of everyone who hears his name. From today, that includes you. So, which part about Joseph Safra intrigues you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. I'd love to see them. If you've enjoyed this, please consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing. Thank you all for watching. I will see you soon, continuing to share great business stories past and present, and whatever else happens in the business world. So thank you all, and have an excellent rest of your day.